Good morning and welcome. This is the morning meeting. Two ways attempt to let you begin your day in an exciting, informative, and fun-filled fashion. Thank you for joining. My name is Mark Halperin, and I'll be your cruise director today. I'm joined by first mate Isaac. I don't know. Sean Spicer is
Isaac
here,
wasn't a
and
first mate, just so you know.
yeah. What was he? Isaac was a
He was a
bartender.
bartender.
Yeah, but I think unofficial first mate status. Dan Turrentine of Gotham City is here, and the three of us couldn't be more excited to spread peace, love, and understanding as we run through the day's events. And we'd love your participation, regardless of who you support in the presidential election, regardless of where you live, who you love, what major league sports teams you prefer. We're not that crazy about fans of Alabama football because you all are snobs. But anybody else is welcome on this platform. Thank you for joining, even the Alabama fans. Breaking news as we come on the air. I love that expression. Breaking news as we come on the air. Donald Trump is asking the United States Supreme Court to halt his Friday sentencing for his conviction on charges related to a hush money scheme 1 day after a New York appeals court judge declined to halt the proceedings. Dan, why does Donald Trump care so much about this? And what are the chances that the Supreme Court, do you think, bail him out?
Well, I think he doesn't want to have it on his record, and he doesn't want whatever the sentence is, just period. And he's hoping that it'll be stopped. I doubt the Supreme Court would get involved, but maybe.
Sean?
I agree. I think this is stupid.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous case to begin with. I think it's embarrassing for New York, to be honest with you. The idea that you're pursuing a case like this when everything else is going on in that city, it's a disgrace to the leadership there. And it is a disgrace to the president to have this. I mean, this whole thing was a ridiculous charge to begin with, but I agree with Dan. I mean, just it looks silly, so I wouldn't want it on there as well, and it takes away some precious time.
My two rules: I never order the sticky rice at a Thai restaurant, and I never predict the outcome of judges, justices, or jurors, but I'm making an exception today. I think the Supreme Court's going to get involved here. I think they're going to stop the sentencing.
Well, the other thing that's silly about this is that Judge Marchand has made it clear that, like, I'm not going to administer any kind of, I mean, this is a show.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if he's trying to be Lance Ito or Judge Wapner or Judge Judy here, but like, this is stupid. And it's a waste of the court's time. It's a mockery of the judicial system. And it's a waste of the president-elect's time. So I wish the Supreme Court didn't have to get involved in this, because this is another example of a wasted judicial time and making it look partisan when it shouldn't be.
I think he's trying to be like Ashley Judd. All right. On the day book today, President of the United States, the First Lady fly back from Los Angeles. The president's attempt to have an event yesterday was stymied by those fires. I wouldn't be surprised if he made another comment on the fires before he boarded Air Force One for the long flight home, due in around whatever that would be if he leaves at 3 Eastern, around 8 o'clock Eastern time. The vice president, little twist on the norm. The beginning of her schedule says the vice president will be in Washington, D.C., where she will receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with staff. Sean, are those available to be covered or not? No, those are closed press. But here's the other element on her schedule.
And by the way, I don't think anyone would cover them.
Yeah, I know a lot about White House rituals. I used to cover the White House, and I'm a kind of I'm an amateur White House historian. I'm like a C-level Beschloss. At 4:15, this is what it says. The vice president will add her signature to the drawer of her desk. The second gentleman will also attend. The signing ceremony in the VP's ceremony office will be pulled press and open to pre-credentialed media. So all vice presidents sign the drawer? Does anybody know about this tradition?
Yeah, so I can actually, I'll post it, since you said it, I'll post a picture. I have one from Pence's desk, or the desk that Pence used, same desk.
Yeah.
It's the second floor of the old executive office building. So if you, from a geographic perspective, if you're looking at the White House from Lafayette Square, the old executive office building is to the right. The vice president's ceremonial office, it's the big one, with the kind of big conference table, is on the second floor overlooking the west wing of the White House. And they have a drawer where every VP has signed their name in it.
Back to whom? Who's the first VP to sign it?
Ooh.
That's
Somebody
a great
Google.
question. I will tell
Somebody
you
Google.
that just fun fact, the press secretary's desk also has all the signatures
That
in
I
there.
know. I know all about that. The vice president, as you suggested, also has an office in the West Wing, which is not tiny. It's a sizable office. The presidents change out the desks, right? In the Oval,
They have
right?
the option to do that, right? So the president comes in.
Yeah,
But
they
most
do. They
presidents
don't
have
always.
always kept the Resolute desk.
I was going to say, I don't think anyone's moved it out since
No.
in
Clinton
the
or
last.
Carter did. It was a
Yeah,
Dem that,
yeah.
yeah.
But they never moved this. Apparently, they never moved. I'm really curious to know who the first vice president to sign that was. Embarrassed I didn't know. Other interesting thing about Kamala Harris's schedule, next week, in the final days of her vice presidency, she's planning to travel to Singapore, Bahrain, and Germany. I don't remember vice presidents doing this. Maybe I'm wrong, but interesting thing there.
Is
Uh,
that annual defense conference in Germany that she has been to the last few years?
that's something that happens in January.
I think it's around anyway.
I think it's in the spring. I don't think
Okay.
that's, but I may be wrong. It's on. They said why she's going. I just don't remember. President Carter's body remains in repose in the Capitol, starting at 7 a.m. a few hours ago. The public was allowed in to continue to pay their respects. That goes overnight for 24 hours, 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. And then, of course, tomorrow is the public service. Um, I don't know that JD Vance is in D.C. today, but I bet he is. Sean, take a look at the window
I
because
will.
because the president-elect is meeting with the Senate tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time. He's in town for the Carter event tomorrow, and he's having a big meeting, and we'll talk about that in a minute. He's having a big meeting with all the Republican senators. High on the agenda, senators are saying publicly, besides, I think, confirmation, is this question of one lump or two on the reconciliation process. A lot of senators still are saying we think two bills is better than one, and so that'll be a great topic of conversation.
Motion
Yeah.
To interject, if I can.
Yes, to recognize the gentleman
This is
from Northern Virginia.
a little mud
For what
to
purpose? For what purpose does the gentleman from Northern Virginia rise?
point of clarification for
Yes.
to the chair. After briefly using this desk in the Oval Office, John F. Kennedy switched to the Resolute desk and moved the Theodore Roosevelt desk to the vice president's ceremonial office. Richard Nixon used this desk in his working time in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, where some of the Watergate tapes were recorded. After Nixon resigned, the desk moved back to the thing where it has been used by every vice president since. Many of the users have signed their desk. I will tweet out a picture of the desk drawer. You can count the signatures, but it's
Do they write a message or they just sign it?
just sign their name.
Just sign their name. Okay. I'm glad there's a photo up for that.
I'm now going
Seems
to
like
Google or go through my photos and find the.
okay. Sean is an inveterate photo taker, by the way, and has a lot of history. I hope he's backing that up.
So can I just tell you real quick, Mark?
Yeah,
funny
yes, sir.
story, real quick.
Yeah.
One of the things that
Sure.
Jen Psaki, of all people, when I took the job, I was press secretary and comms director. She said to me, she wrote a note, very kind of her. We talk about notes getting passed on. Both her and Josh Ernst left me very kind notes. And one of Jen's biggest pieces of advice was, life moves really quick in the White House. Take as many pictures as you can to document this, to remember your time. And I took it to heart. In fact, I've passed that on to every press secretary since, giving Jen credit for that. But it's true. And for that reason, I can now go back and find random pictures of a desk drawer.
Yeah, that's important. Again, we're grateful to all of you for joining, being part of the two-way community. We'd love for you to spread the word. We want more and more and more and more and more and more Americans to watch. If you want to be part of the conversation, please raise your hand. If you've never raised your hand to ask a conversation, and I see at least one person, I believe, today raising their hand for the first time, please do. We welcome new people. We encourage new people. We want lots of participation. As I said, unless you like Alabama football, we want to hear what you have to say. I'm kidding. I love Alabama football, by the way. That's the basis of that joke. And as I'll be saying more than once throughout the program today, oof. All right. We always want to be forward-looking here. The Trump press conference was practically 24 hours ago. I covered it extensively on last night's Two-Way Tonight. We're not here to go chapter and verse through what was said, but I do want to hear from each of you. Name one thing that's happened at the press conference that's applicable to the future going forward. What's something you take from that press conference on policy or style or Trump's relationship with the media? What's one thing you take away from that you say, everybody watch for this because you saw it yesterday? Dan.
That he is going to push and push and push, and I don't think he always knows what the desired outcome is that he wants, but he's going to try to get something. So he just is going to flood the zone. He doesn't, 90% of it won't happen in totality, but he will, get something for each of the things he said.
Sean.
I don't mean to sound cliche in this, but at the end of that press conference, I sort of said, this is what America first looks like. There was this overarching theme. renaming the Gulf of Mexico, reclaiming Greenland, talking about the relationship with Canada and Mexico, bringing jobs back. Like everything is central to this theme of America first. And it manifests itself in everything. As I made a list yesterday of everything that he was doing, it all came back to that central idea. Like there was nothing that wasn't under that umbrella. And I agree with Dan. I mean, it's flooding the zone, but it's done so under the guidance of America should be prominent and first in the thought process. I thought the way he answered the question about Canada was excellent, right? They're our neighbor. We want to be a good neighbor, but why are we going into debt to subsidize them? And I think that epitomizes so much of what's happening now. Like, why are we the ones that have to deal with the consequences of other people? He talked about that with respect to NATO too. It's a two-way street. You agreed to put 2% of your GDP into national defense. Why do we protect you if you don't do that? Right. There was an overarching theme that I think was very telling to what, and it was much more defined than I thought in the first term. Like everything he said, I thought went back to that one point.
You know what's interesting though? I mean, historically, second terms of presidents are foreign policy focused because it's what they can control. He doesn't need Congress. I mean, I also saw this as kind of like, again, he's just looking for targets. Right. I mean, Sean, you said reread the Art of the Deal, which I actually did for like the 5th time over the holidays. And he says oftentimes he doesn't really fully know what he wants from kind of what he's pushing for. It kind of comes to him as he's doing it. And I think all of these are soft targets that, to your point, it is America first. To Mark's point, it's good kind of TV. It sounds good. And he's going to try to figure it out as he goes along. I don't think he has an end game for any of those right now, other than getting the hostages out.
Okay, I'll tell you, those are great answers as far as I'm concerned. I'll tell you what I took away from it. And again, there's a lot there. I've said before, I'll keep repeating it. The only thing harder than running against Donald Trump is covering him as a journalist. And if you look at the questions that were asked and the Insta coverage and then the coverage in the last 20 hours or so, the press is in a lot of trouble trying to figure out how to cover this. Even if they want to be unbiased, even if they want to be true to the mission of the media, holding all powerful interests accountable to the public interest and telling the great stories of our time, informing voters, even if they want to do those things and citizens, even if they want to do those things and even if they're well funded, even if they're not forced to make decisions about how to cover this administration based on money and bandwidth, even then, covering this guy is a bear. It is really hard to cover him and live up to the ideals and responsibilities of the media. And Donald Trump knows that. And he knows how to manipulate. And I heard yet again another story yesterday, the same stories I've been hearing for a dozen years, of someone who knows Trump well and knows Trump is very, very smart and has to deal with people all the time who say Trump's dumb. And it is so not in the service of truth to say Trump is dumb, but if you're anti-Trump and you think Trump is dumb, you are poisoning your ability to grapple with him. Because if you think you're dealing with a dumb person, you're gonna underestimate him. So I think you saw yesterday, Trump is not dumb. And although he is sloppy with his words, and although he says things that aren't true, and he says weird things, and it's stream of consciousness, all these things that really get under the skin of anti-Trump people, there's a method to almost everything he said. And if we put the entire transcript up, Sean could annotate every line of the press conference, and 90% of it, there'd be a linear method to the words he chose. It is not as sloppy. 90% of it is not as sloppy as poor observers of Trump think. All right, either of you want to say anything else about Trump for now? Okay, good. Let's talk about Joe Biden.
I would just say, I actually look.
I knew you did.
I know. So just pretend that. But
Oof,
the thing that I find fascinating is this, again, I think it's too many times, to your point about covering Trump, everything's covered in isolation. If we go back to the Meet the Press interview that he had with Welker, the last press conference, there is a measured change in his tone and tenor that I think will sort of, I'll be intrigued to see how if it continues up through the speech and day one of the inauguration, because I think he's coming at this term with a much greater degree of focus and understanding of legacy and getting things done. Obviously, that's not that big of a revelation when it comes to a first term, but a second term. But I think the 4 years out of office have really helped him understand how to navigate Washington and actually achieve things. So the other thing is, I will just say that a lot of the reporting this morning, you mentioned this yesterday, Mark, but look at the groups. He's talking about bringing the entire Republican Senate conference down. The governors are going to Mar-a-Lago. 3 groups have come down over the weekend. Like, he is building a team in a way that we didn't do in 2016. And there's a degree of, we talked about the reasons yesterday, the pomp and circumstance of going to Mar-a-Lago. But he's doing it in a much more constructive way, and I think he's going to be hugely successful. I think Susie's done a phenomenal job of setting out the staff and the tenor and the mindset, and he has done a great job of getting all the troops in line. So I feel, very good about where he's headed into the first days of his second term.
Yeah, and I'll add, because I see it in our chat, I saw it on X, kind of in the Democratic, ecosystem up and down all day yesterday. People are like, how can you take it seriously? You don't look at every single word and every single idea kind of as like a hard actual thing. What he's trying to do, I think, is get something, additional from Canada. Can we get the minerals or a military base in Greenland? Like, I think John Fetterman, and we're going to get to him, kind of said it best yesterday, which is like, if he can do well by America, it's good for America. And I think, don't look at everything he says so literally and pull your hair out, right? Step back, look at kind of on a more macro level, and see what he can get done.
We will get to Fetterman, but I'll just say along the lines of what you just said. If you're trying to beat Donald Trump, or you're trying to cover him, okay, and you're not a politician or a reporter inclined to like Trump or like what Trump stands for, it is even more important, to my mind, that you watch him and think about what he says and what he's doing, not with an eye towards mocking him or being frustrated by him or outraged, but saying, why is this working? What is he saying? And what's his style that's appealing to people? Because he just won the election. He's more popular than the Democratic politicians, not just the ones he beat. And the things he's talking about, I'll say this again, they're not just popular with the quote unquote extreme MAGA base. The things he talked about yesterday are popular. We're working on a research project, I hope, that will come to fruition within a week or so, about how Americans feel about this Manifest Destiny 2.0. But I bet you it's more popular with the country than it is in the New York Times editorial board or in the Washington Post newsroom. We shall see.
By the way, you saw I always get a kick out of this. We talk about something for everyone who understands. We talk about the ethos of this platform, the program. Yesterday, we talked about Manifest Destiny and what was going on in the lead of Playbook this morning in Politico. Manifest Destiny. I mean, just FYI, you're getting it ahead of the curve when you watch the show.
I hope so. The other thing about the show I'll say is, we're not interested in the algorithm telling us who should watch. We're interested in everybody watching. Right? That'll always be the ethos of political coverage on Two-Way is everybody. We want everybody, even Alabama fans. We want everybody to come watch. We're never going to look at the algorithm and say, well, we gotta only appeal to people who hate Trump or only people who love Trump. All right, Joe Biden did an interview with Susan Page on Sunday. USA Today held it for several days, not sure why. Came out this morning. You can read in my Substack, you can see a link to the full transcript and then a write-up of the interview. The two things that are getting, you can go ahead and put up 101, please. The two things that are getting the most attention relate to Joe Biden's view on whether he could have won the election, and then his view of, could he have governed for 4 more years? Okay? I read the whole transcript. A bunch of stuff popped out to me because I have peculiar sensibilities. One thing is, and maybe this was already known, he revealed that his granddaughter is having a C-section on January 8th, which is today. So I think that's what it said, January 8th. It might have said 11th, but I think it said the 8th. So I don't know. That seemed like an overly personal detail to share unless it was already public. The other thing is, he seems to suggest that at the very end, there's a long discussion of his library. You can put up 102, please, or 103, please. There's a long discussion of his library, and he suggests that CAA, the Hollywood Talent Agency, might represent him in the library. I don't really know what that means, but interesting. Again, there's a bunch of little stuff like that. But as I said, the two big things. Would he have won? It's presumptuous to say that, but I think yes, based on his view of the polling. And then no such confidence about serving 4 more years. I don't know. Now, you can take the graphic down. On the second point about whether he could serve for 4 more years, I'll tell you my view, and then Sean, and then Dan. I know Joe Biden well enough to say, and if you read the totality of the answer, people are sort of outraged. Like, how dare you run for re-election when you don't think you could have necessarily made it for 4 years? He's basically just being Irish existential and saying, who knows what would happen in 4 years? Who knows what would happen to anybody in 4 years? So I don't think that part is particularly damning. That's my view. Sean.
Couple things. I will say this. There are a couple issues I had with how it was written, but I will give Susan Page from USA Today credit for probably being the most honest and straightforward. And obviously it's a little different to be able to write it now than 6 months ago, but I thought she asked some real good questions. She annotated them all. There was no, like, she put every literally, I mean, it looked like it was literally every answer was written as it was stated, which is not what a lot of these guys do. They help him make a more coherent sentence when it's written. I give her credit. I mean, again, I don't think that this is a high bar to hit, but I will say that it's probably the best interview that I've seen done in the last year. Not that he gives that many. I did think it was odd that he wouldn't. He thinks he can win, but then when he equivocated, to your point about the next 4 years, I don't feel good. I mean, when you look at somebody at that age and the command demands of the job, et cetera, I have a feeling he said, "Who knows? We'll see where I am at 86." I don't wish ill will on anybody, and I don't say this in a disrespectful way, but I think we'll know the answer sooner rather than later. I don't think this is like I don't think.
I agree, and I'll say again, he shouldn't have run the first time. He wasn't up to being president in 2021. Dan.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you guys. And just as I said, don't take everything Trump says literally, Mark. I agree with you. I would have a little grace with it. But look, three things. One, Joe Biden, I love him, but as a Democrat, he would have gotten annihilated, and he would have brought the party down with him. The debate against Trump in June was not the exception to his cognitive state, but more the rule. I mean, I don't believe so far they've even put an audio transcript out yet. I mean, the fact that his kind of last word, he's going to give these two speeches, is a press interview with Susan Page that only has a written transcript, tells you all that you need to know, right? Trump got more eyeballs.
He might do a TV interview.
Oh, okay. Maybe he will, but so far, and in the last 4 years, he very rarely went on camera, very rarely did public events. And I think, the other part of it is, and this is consistent with the last few months, is his explanation, that this is really a filter problem, that the media doesn't filter out what's true and what's not anymore. I mean, I would argue that the mainstream media did act as a filter for him. The problem was voters didn't buy it. I mean, whether it's Afghanistan or inflation or immigration or the woke issues, if you read the New York Times or watch, MSNBC or CNN or read Bloomberg, it mostly reported what Biden would want you to hear. The problem was voters had their own real life experiences to turn on. And so it just made me shake my head. I alternate between sadness and anger when I read stuff like this.
Yeah. I mean, they have their real life experiences in all those substantive areas, but also regarding his ability to do the job. And,
totally.
And yet, up until the CNN debate, when the press decided to drop the conspiracy for a couple of weeks to drive him off the ticket, I think he was still arguably right because his view was, if I step down, Kamala Harris will be the nominee and she can't win. And if somehow she weren't the nominee, none of these other people could win. So I think it's actually true, arguably at least, that the day before the debate, he was the Democrats' best chance of holding the White House as an incumbent protected by the media and by Democrats who were lying about his condition. But I continue to say, I've known the vice president a long time. I like her. I have respect for her. But this notion that she couldn't win the race, she shouldn't have run. If the view of her camp, which a lot of people who support her say, this was an unwinnable race, then the person who had to defend the Biden-Harris record shouldn't have run. She should have just said, I need to govern with the president the rest of the way. Let's have an open convention. There would have been a lot of risks, and I'm not sure any of those other people will win. But I'm sick of Harris defenders saying she couldn't have won because it was an unwinnable race. Don't run. If you can't, if your judgment is it's an unwinnable race, don't get in. Let someone
Right.
else who think they can win run.
Yeah, I mean, that's a cop out of an excuse, right? We all know that. Like the bottom
Yeah.
line is, she wouldn't, if she truly thought that at the time, she would have made an excuse and said, you know, I can't do this or whatever. Or
Yeah.
But to suddenly turn around and, you know, and make this case. And by the way, that her aides are making the same case that, you know, well, I mean, Carville's talking about the economy and everything else.
Yeah.
So
I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me how many of the days during the 107 she had no public schedule. I'm still waiting for one of you to give me
Well, and
that.
the other part of this is, Mark, and your own data and the data that's public out there does not support the idea it wasn't winnable. There was that 5 to 10% middle of the electorate was open to her. They up until like late September, they kept telling, pollsters and focus group conductors, we are open to her. She just never filled in the blanks, or what she did fill in was so, blah.
And it's laughable to say it's unwinnable when it was so close.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, quickly, John Fetterman. As we search around for green shoots in the Democrats trying to understand how do we come back, John Fetterman, stands out almost daily for a lot of things he does: authenticity, willing to criticize his own party, willing to talk about controversial things in a way where he's comfortable. He's turned into, whether you like him or not, and some people on the left don't like him, just as a case study of a guy who barely got elected, had his health issues, and is now a singular presence for the Democratic Party. Here he is on Fox News last night talking about Trump flirtation with Greenland. 106, please.
There's a lot of talk about Greenland, for example. Now, and I know there's a lot of freakouts, and of course I would never support taking it by force. But I do think it's a responsible conversation if they were open to acquiring it, and whether just buying it outright. I mean, if anyone think that's bonkers, it's like, well, remember the Louisiana purchase? Oh, I think Alaska was a great deal too. $50 million, I think it was. It was referred to as Seward's Folly, and now that was Alaska now. So, I mean, open to having all kinds of conversations as well. And now I don't think it's not helpful to freak out, but some things might work out, some may not, but that's part of an ongoing dialogue. But he hasn't even taken office in 2 weeks. And, we really need to pace ourselves if we're going to freak out over every last tweet or every last conversation or press conference.
Oof. All right. One more thing, guys, before you guys weigh in on it. There's so much embedded in that about just how unusual his performance is. And he's talking like a normal person. So yesterday, the House passed the Laken Riley Act related to dealing with people in the country illegally who are accused of crimes. It got about several dozen Democratic House members
48.
voted for it. 48. So that's several dozen. 4 dozen by my math. Here is John Fetterman again on Fox last night talking about whether Democrats should and could support the Laken Riley Act in the Senate. 104, please.
And now, if you're here illegally and you're committing crimes and those things, I don't know why anybody thinks that it's controversial that they all need to go.
Do you think that this was one of, if not the biggest issue for this election?
Well, I think if we can't, there's 47 of us in the Senate, and if we can't pull up with 7 votes, if we can't get at least 7 out of 47, and if we can't, then that's the reason why we lost.
Ruben Gallega this morning at 7 a.m. tweeted, the new senator from Arizona, not only am I voting yes on the Laken Riley Act, I'm co-sponsoring the bill. Arizonans know better than most the real consequences of today's border crisis, et cetera, et cetera. Sean, you noticed that one Democratic House member who voted no has a much different perspective. Go ahead and put up the graphic while Sean explains, and then talk about.
Yeah, so Sean Casten, Democrat from Illinois, and this is one of the things that I thought was odd, but he put it out under his personal Twitter account, not his congressional account. And if you actually go to it, it says official tweets and whatever are under @RepCasten. And I'm like, well, explaining a bill to me seems like a pretty official act, but it's which makes me wonder why he's putting it out under his personal thing unless he has a political issue. But he explains this by basically saying, well, if you're in the country, it's a 9-thread or 9-tweet thread, so you've got to read all 9. But the bottom line is he basically makes the case that, well, existing law makes it, deals with people who are in the country illegally, so therefore this bill is duplicative, which seems to me that, okay, well then, number one, for all the times that you bring up gun issues and want additional gun issues, I would argue, well, existing law makes whatever that crime is illegal to begin with. Why do we need more laws? So your argument falls flat initially. And secondly, the idea that you're defending people who are in the country illegally who then commit another crime, I'm actually blown away. And I think John Fetterman, the scary part is that he's actually just speaking common sense. And yet we're having to, explain this. If you can be all for immigration and helping the poor and all sorts of things, but to say that we're going to defend people who come into the country illegally and then commit another crime against an American citizen, I mean, the number one job of any elected official at any level of government is to protect its people. And the idea that Democrats, I actually can't believe that this is the hill to die on, right? This is one of those ones where just pass it and go. I will be interested to see what the administration, there's what they normally put out called a SAP, a Statement of Administration Policy. The administration has yet to put one out on this bill, but I'll be interested to see what Biden says about this, because I don't know why, if your only premise is that it's duplicative, which is ridiculous, then just vote for it and say, fine, then we'll double down on making sure that we protect the American people. But I think Fetterman speaks common sense more than anything else, and Kasten defending this is silly.
Dan, if you were speaking to like a graduate school seminar on political science and asked to explain why is Fetterman distinctive, how would you describe it?
Sure. He's very comfortable speaking. He's plain spoken, and he seems to always ask, what would my constituents think of this? Like, that is his orientation. So to Sean's point, okay, if people are here illegally and they commit a crime, we should do something about it, right? Don't just knee jerk and say there's something on the books and like it's somebody else's fault. Like, let's take action. My constituents will support this. If it's Greenland, rather than just saying like, oh my God, this is crazy, like it's ludicrous, you hear them. Maybe this could turn out to be something good. Maybe America could benefit from this. So he has a way of kind of just staying calm, always thinking about his constituents. And where he disagrees, he's very comfortable saying, that's crazy, and I'm not going to do this, right? So he has kind of an authenticity and a trust, because he is not knee-jerk with just the party line. But, Pennsylvania is a swing state. He reflects it well. And I think, more people should model after him.
Dan, the one thing I'll say that I'll tweak on this is that it's not just that he's trying to reflect his constituents. It's something that we've talked about before. You brought this up with AOC a few times. There's a degree of authenticity. When Fetterman speaks, he doesn't look like he's faking it, or that he's, the people of, I cannot stand when a politician goes, the people of my district, like somehow they're special. I mean, like, you either believe something or you don't. And Fetterman speaks with a level of authenticity and conviction that's real. You don't have to agree with him on everything. But when he speaks, I think this is a guy who actually believes what he's saying. He's not looking down at his notes going, what was I supposed to say on question 4?
Yep.
And that matters. And that's why I think, as AOC resonates with a lot of people, that's why I think Bernie Sanders resonates with a lot of people. That's why I think Trump resonates with a lot of people.
Could you guys imagine him voting for the reconciliation bill?
Him? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Me also. I think he could be a huge wild card, because both parties do this. You get one vote from the other party and you call it a bipartisan bill.
Yeah.
And I think, he'll vote, as he said, he's going to vote for confirmation for people who maybe no other Democrat won't. Dan, if you're Chuck Schumer, how do you view the presence of John Fetterman in the caucus?
It's helpful and it's not helpful. I think it allows you to establish an end of the spectrum and go to the progressive base and say, hey, look, like, John Fetterman's from Pennsylvania. He's popular. He's got a good following. Like, we can't just attack him. We can't just kind of speak to the base. I think he's a headache for the opposite reason, which is he is going to constantly say, time out, let me wait, let me hear this. He's rarely going to be the bomb thrower. And sometimes you need to have the bomb throwers in your party. You need them for their energy and their passion.
Dan, I totally agree. The only thing I slightly disagree with you on, it's pronounced popular,
What did I say?
not popular.
Oh,
Just no, that's a little joke. It's a little joke that Mary gets. I
oof.
see her smiling. Oof.
Okay.
Mary, come on in. Thank you for joining. Could you explain my joke to Dan after you unmute, and then tell us where you are? You got to unmute first. There you go. There you go. Mary, welcome
Did I
in.
unmute?
You did. Explain
Yeah.
my joke to Dan, then tell everybody where you are and then what's on your mind.
Oh, popular. I'm sorry, I was mucking around with my unmute button, so I wasn't paying attention.
So you don't get that joke either?
Sorry.
All right.
But I also don't
It's from
follow football, so I
it's
don't
from
get all
Wick
your football
it's
jokes.
it's from Wicked. It's from the song Popular in Wicked. But
Ah.
that's all right. That's right. Mary, where are you this morning in that beautiful kitchen?
I'm in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and it's too cold to play golf.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're glad to have your attention and the attention economy away from the tea and to us. Tell us what's on your mind, please, and thank you again for being here.
Well, as we get ready for Trump to be inaugurated, I still am sort of looking back at the last several years with Biden and what the Democrats have been doing. And I can't help but wonder if they didn't outsmart themselves with some of the things that they did. So, for instance, trying to manage things in the 2020 primary to make sure that Biden came in. I happen to share your view that Biden wasn't really up to snuff back in 2020, but nonetheless, they did that. And then whoever was behind that, they were unable to prevent him from running again in 2024. So you ended up essentially cutting off any open primary process. We'll never know whether Harris would have won that primary, but she didn't win the first one. She didn't even last to Iowa. So the Democrats will never know who that might have been. And then thirdly, there was some brain trust, it seems, that was behind putting all of the lawfare together. And if nothing else, to me, it seems like it backfired. If nothing else, it basically ensured that Trump got the nomination because it had the effect of sidelining some strong competitors. So here we are looking at Trump 2.0. But so my question is, did the powers that be in the Democratic Party just outsmart themselves by trying to manage this process over the last 8 years?
Brilliant question. Dan.
Yeah, I think in 2020, Joe Biden won the nomination. I mean, if you actually go back in late 2019, it was Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders who were ascendant. In fact, it's what knocked Harris out because Harris couldn't answer the Medicare for All question that was raging within the party. And Biden, if you recall, lost Iowa, lost New Hampshire, was really almost about to be done. And then Jim Clyburn endorsed him. He wins South Carolina and off he goes. So, Biden did earn the nomination, although it was kind of in a classic, like falling into it a little bit fashion. I think in 2024, you are correct. The party kind of closed its eyes, knew what was really going on, and just thought maybe they could just push this through. And frankly, I think they thought Trump would lose it more than Biden would win it. And to your point, lawfare, I think I will always wonder what would have happened in the DeSantis-Trump early stages if that lawfare had not happened and Trump and his team, to his credit, said you're with us or you're with them. And it made everybody in the party say, we're with Trump, and made them look small as a result. Well, we'll just always wonder.
Sean.
I want to pick up on one small thread that didn't get a lot of attention, but it picks off what Mary's talking about. This in one of the interviews, or at least in one of the stories that was reporting, I don't think it was a direct quote. There's a lot of discussion about Biden being very upset with Merrick Garland and the speed at which he didn't go after Trump, which I think is so funny because Biden was the one who talked about the fact that he wasn't going to interfere with his Justice Department, and he's now talking, at least among his aides, about regrets with Merrick Garland because he didn't do that, right? So I think it's ironic to hear all this because Mary's talking about it backfiring, and I think the irony is that they tried to pretend that they weren't in favor of pursuing this, and yet the reality that we're seeing behind the scenes is they really did want this.
I wrote in my newsletter this morning the victories that Trump had in lawfare, they weren't perfect, right? He did get one conviction, but mostly they had victories. And I think a lot of people in the media and Democrats say it was because the judges were corrupt and the Supreme Court was corrupt and the Trump people used unhanded legal tactics. That legal team, just from a competency point of view, did an extraordinary job. And some of them are going into the Justice Department now. And
Yep.
so it's going to be interesting to see how they use their newfound government power, particularly related to Jack Smith. But the other piece of that equation is I have zero doubt that there was more coordination on lawfare that has been reported. I have zero doubt of that. And I think it could be extensively more. And I think that we may see a congressional investigation about that. We may see a Justice Department investigation. Maybe we'll see someone in the media look into it. But I think that lawfare is not going to age well. And again, just from a zeros and ones results point of view, that legal team did an incredible job for Donald Trump. It cost him millions, but did an incredible job. And by the way, he's now in this term unburdened by that, at least so far in terms of investigations. And the Democrats have a real credibility problem, not just with the MAGA base, but with a lot of Americans because of what was done. That's my view on lawfare. All right, Mary, how'd you find two-way?
I think I probably found you the same way a lot of people did, through Megyn Kelly. Through
All
Megyn
right.
Kelly, I found Ruthless, and I found you guys. I started watching maybe in early October, and
Okay.
my husband sort of wonders why I disappear for an hour every morning, and this is where I go.
All right. Well, we're delighted to have you. We hope you'll come back, and thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Have a great day. All right, Douglas, welcome in. Please tell everybody who doesn't know where you are, what's on your mind, and after you unmute, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Doug Douglas. I'm in Naples, Florida, where it's a chilly 46 degrees. Too cold for golf here this morning, although by 11 o'clock, I think it should be good. What I wanted to talk about is how serious do you think Trump is about Canada, the 51st state? I think most people think he's just trolling Justin Trudeau, which he probably is, and Justin's taking the bait in his tweet, "There's no more than a snowball's chance in hell." I live in Montreal in the summer, and a lot of my Canadian friends would love to be the 51st state. There's a poll, I put it on the chat last night. 90% of Canadians would love to be the 51st state. How many Americans think would love to be the 14th province of Canada? Nobody. I can't imagine anybody saying that. So probably it's not going to happen, but this certainly, I mean, given Trudeau's unpopularity in Quebec, Legault, who is a very nationalist French Canadian kind of guy, is not very popular either because he's so anti-business. A lot of people would love it. I'm just curious what your and Dan's and Sean's point of view on it is. Is it just trolling or is there some seriousness behind it?
Sean,
Love the platform, brother.
thank you.
I'll
Sean.
lead with this. I think Greenland is serious. I think Dan mentioned this earlier. I think Canada is about getting a better deal. I don't know politically that I'd want Canada as the 51st state because I think that net. I'm not really sure that would help us politically. So I mean, it's interesting though. That being said, Kevin O'Leary the other day, the Shark Tank businessman, was talking about different theories that potentially Canada could get on the US dollar. There could be, I mean, I think that there are some potential relationship strengthening things that could occur, but I don't know that there's ever, I mean, that it's anything more than bluster and teasing Trudeau when it comes to actually becoming the 51st state.
Dan.
I think it's two things. I think one, he wants Canada to take some action on the border that Trump can say, they did this because of me. It is more secure now because of me. And I think there will be some economic concessions that Canada will make, whether it's with, lumber or something that, again, he will say to Sean's kind of overarching, make America great again narrative. I improve the economic fortunes of Americans because Canada has agreed to do A, B through whatever Z. I don't think it will become another state.
So there's trade, as my colleagues have said. There's trade, there's the border, there's defense spending. There's also access to use Canada for American military and intelligence operations. I think it's clear there's a premium being put on geographically trying to check both China and Russia. And again, just like the Panama Canal, just like Greenland, Canada's a hugely, geographically important piece of land. So Trump's posture always is what's mine is mine and what yours will negotiate over. And this is not weakening the America's hand versus Canada. It's strengthening America's hand versus Canada. And as you know, Douglas, Canadians, not all of them, but Canadians really love the United States. They're really invested in the United States. They're really interested. And I think Barack Obama, if he was Canadian, could be made premier for life. They love Barack Obama in Canada. Trump's not very popular in Canada, and I'm sure that bothers him. And I'm sure he's trying to figure out, in part, how to leverage this so Canadians like him more. Sean, what do you want to say about that?
I think that, again, this gets back to trolling versus the political reality of actually wanting Canada as a state or territory. I'm not sure that we want it. I think he just loves to tease it, and for some of the aforementioned reasons that you stated.
Well, there's a Trump-like person who will likely be the next leader, and Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
I'm sure that pronouncing his name right. The Alberta premier, who's even more Trump than Trump. So, we'll see how this goes.
That video of him eating an apple, talking to the reporter, is one of my favorites. If you haven't seen it.
It's good. Paul, if you can find that video, I'd love to show it to people. It's very compelling. So maybe we'll show that. Douglas, thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Hey, Mark, if I can just one thing that didn't hasn't been touched on yet, and I'd be remiss if we didn't mention it from the press conference yesterday, is I thought the way that the president put the hostages, the American hostages that are still being held in Gaza, forefront, was very telling. The idea that we've had these Americans held hostage for as long as they have, and it has received such scant attention, is a travesty, in my opinion. And I think if Trump actually gets this done, and we heard Steve Witkoff, his special envoy to the Middle East, address what they believe is some positive movement, this will be a huge, huge victory for the American people and for Donald Trump, a la Reagan, Carter, getting the hostages out, but in a very modern way. I mean, obviously back then we didn't have the mediums that we have now, but I thought that it was very, very insightful that the president-elect made this part of his comments, brought Steve Witkoff up. There's a level of attention and detail to these citizens that has not been paid, which I think is again a travesty. But I was very, very proud of him that he made this such a central point yesterday, and that there will be consequences if they're not released.
I have two things to say about that. First, Dan, that's proof that Sean does not watch Two-Way Tonight, because we basically said that exact thing about 24 hours ago. So thank you for that. The other thing is, I'll defend the current administration on this point. When you're in the White House, if you talk a lot about Americans held hostage, it elevates them and it makes it harder to get them out because it makes them more valuable. So I don't think it's fair to criticize the incumbent administration for not elevating them. They work on it every day. Yeah. They want them out. They just tactically don't think it's a good idea to highlight them. I know it looks bad, but I think it's a cheap shot for, and I'm not accusing you of engaging in a cheap shot, but for outsiders, for the president-elect to criticize it, it's just not the same. They're just not in the same position.
But you know what, though, Mark, I will like to kind of bridge you to is I think this is where Biden not being public and not out talking to the press and giving interviews, saying this. I mean, to Sean's point, the incoming president kind of pounded the lectern, brought up his guy, is talking tough. Biden, like all we hear are leaked stories. Like, what did they leak today? We told Trump that Gaza is about to implode with a humanitarian, like that, I no doubt was leaked to counter his message on, which has been the history, the kind of like one day we're tough, one day we're unsure. And I think to Sean's point, the clarity of Trump is refreshing, I think, for a lot of people. But to Mark's point, they have, Jake Sullivan has been working on this almost night and day, practically killing himself trying to solve.
All right. Sean's pretending he can't hear us.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
I don't necessarily fully agree. I'll leave that conversation to say I don't entirely agree with the tactics, but that you ascribe, but that's your,
all right.
Agree to disagree.
Rick Hall, welcome in. Please unmute. Tell us how the dimensions of that watch and what's on your mind.
The dimensions of my watch, it's large.
Yeah, it's big.
Is
that an Apple Watch? Is that an Apple Watch?
No, it's an Amazon 1495 watch.
Oh, okay. Paying by the inch. Hold that thing up. Hold up. I want people to see. That is a big watch, man. All right. What's
No,
on your
I
mind,
I have
Rick?
pretty skinny wrists. Maybe
Tell
that's.
folks, tell folks where you are.
Yeah, I came in a few minutes late this morning. I've been slacking off my two-way. I've just had busy things, the busy weeks. But you may have touched on this, but I watched on replay the press conference yesterday. Any significance to the New York Times, David Sanger getting the first question? I think he did. Maybe,
He did.
I could have missed that. But I thought that might be significant because he doesn't seem to care anymore. Yet he goes right at the New York Times, and not just the New York Times, but maybe their most one
Yeah.
of their most
So
I'll
I'll go
writers.
first. I'll go first because I've been thinking a lot about this. So last night on Two Way Tonight, we talked about John Podhoretz and I took the position that Trump cares far less about the establishment media, the dominant media, than he used to. And I think that's unambiguously true. He sees that he doesn't need them as much. He also knows that he's unlikely to have their enduring love, and therefore it's a fool's errand to try to court them. But I have very little doubt that he likes the prestige. David Sanger is literally one of the few, like, fully respectable reporters in America. Experienced, fair, hardworking, knowledgeable,
Agreed.
well sourced. And so for Trump, and I saw this in 2000, the Bush campaign. A lot of people who worked in the Bush press office said to me, we're so let down because we've worked our whole lives to be in senior position in a top presidential campaign, and the reporters covering us know nothing. They don't know what happened in the '96 campaign. They're just completely ignorant. They didn't cover the civil rights movement. They never covered Capitol Hill. They're just these young, mostly young people thrown out here. So to be able to call on David Sanger if you're president-elect, that's a big deal for Trump, for anybody would be, compared to some of the alternatives. But at the same time, again, I don't think he cares nearly as much about what David Sanger thinks as he did 8 years ago. Sean, am I right or wrong?
I think you're pretty right. I think there's an element of the legacy media, the Time Magazine, the New York Times, 60 Minutes, etc.
He'll always care to some extent.
Yeah, but you saw some of the people that he called on last time, Brian Glenn from Real America's Voice, that I think he sort of wants a mix, but he wants to make sure that he maintains that level of, hey, he led with the New York Times. You can't critique him, right? I mean, that's always in the back of your head. You want to make sure there's this balance so that you can call on some of the folks that are probably more predisposed to your side, but you want to make sure that you do that. And so we'll see, but I wouldn't read too much into it. But I do think that it portends well for the legacy media in the sense that they need to, like, if I were worried, if I were at the New York Times or the Washington Post and worried, am I going to get shut out? It's obvious that that's clearly not the tactic.
Yeah, at least not yet. Dan?
I think he'll always want the approval of the New York Times and Maggie Haberman and David Sanger. But I think to your point, Sean, he's got more leverage now. And I think it's going to try to bring them to him versus him always going to them.
Right.
Rick,
He was also very dismissive. Like, I think Sanger's question was, can you guarantee the world that you will not use military force against Panama or Greenland? And I thought Trump looked at him kind of like, what are you even asking? Of course not.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
he did that in the first one, Rick, too. And I
Yeah.
thought that was his tactic, and he answered the question about Syria. We talked about, I'm not going to discuss this. Why would anyone? I mean, he
Yeah,
answered things,
right.
and he didn't always do that during the first term. There's a level of
Confidence.
seriousness that I think has come into his responses that's excellent.
Yeah. Rick, thank you. Great question. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. You won't hear such a detailed conversation about the psycho relationship between Donald Trump and David Sanger anywhere else. That's a two-way exclusive. All right. Sam, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please, after you unmute. There you go. You're good.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. You're good.
I'm from Arizona, and actually that's part of why I wanted to get your guys' opinion. I just wonder, when they talk about, when they talk about like primarying people, and I see what, groups like Charlie Kirk's group and things like that, and I see, they talk about, well, I'm going to, we'll primary you if you don't vote the way we want. And yet, for everything that Charlie Kirk did during Trump's getting Trump elected, I see what's happened to Arizona, and I only bring it up because it's a swing state, so maybe there's a little interest, and I'm just curious. I mean, it almost seems like they'd prefer to have to lose a rhino, so to speak, and to have a Democrat get elected than to have like some of the other Republicans that have been elected before. So I wonder, like, the mess that has been made in Arizona politics, knowing that like Carrie Lake wouldn't, I mean, going for two different, having two different elected offices, everybody knew she was going to lose. And I have to laugh when like Ruben Gallego goes on and talks about how he got elected as a Democrat, and this, everybody knows why he got elected, because nobody won. So I'm just curious, like, do they really think that it's better to lose a rhino, so to speak, and get people primaried and then lose the election? Because I don't really understand what their whole philosophy has been here anyway.
Dan, thank you for that, Sam. Great question. Dan.
Yeah, I think I'll take it from the Democratic side a little bit, which is that I think there are a lot of Democrats look at Arizona and they think we didn't do too much wrong and we don't need to make a lot of change because Trump is a singular candidate. And when not on the ballot, 18, 22, they think 26, we will be successful, because look at what happened when Carrie Lake was put forward and in other places where kind of crazy candidates were on the ballot, right? And so they absolve themselves of anything. I think the question for Republicans is, can Trump and what he stands for and the way he conducts himself transfer to a lasting political party that can be successful? And I think Arizona is an interesting test case so far, and we'll see going forward.
Yeah, because I mean, with him having such a huge presence, like Charlie Kirk and the group, and yet, when I see, what's happened with every other election, they never even talk about it. When I hear Charlie Kirk talk, he never even talks about, what's happened to Arizona. And I'm just curious, you guys, from the Republican standpoint, do they just not care? I mean, I'm just curious what.
Yeah. Sean will be speaking over a Canadian politician eating an apple. Go ahead, Sean.
I'm just looking up the election results. I mean, look, to be
on the topic, I mean, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess.
I feel like that's like
Sean,
strange brew.
Keep rolling the tape with no video. Go ahead, Sean.
I love that.
No, I think
audio.
actually the video is phenomenal, because the guy says go ahead. I love the way he continues this video, because he keeps the guy keeps saying, some people say, and he goes, what people? Like, he calls them out in a way that is just phenomenal. So if you haven't seen the video, make sure you do listen to it with sound. But
we'll put it in the chat, but I just like the visuals too.
Yeah.
Just like keeps eating the apple. All right, Sean, go ahead and answer.
I would just say, look, let's just remember these weren't blowout elections in Arizona. So before we say people couldn't win, both the gubernatorial race last cycle or 2 cycles ago and the Senate race this cycle were not exactly landslides. So,
yeah.
I mean, and I say this respectfully to your question, but like, there's no they when we say they want someone to win.
I guess I'm talking about like Charlie Kirk group
no, but I get it. But what Charlie Kirk and a lot of conservatives, including myself, want is a true conservative that will actually follow through and not, squish out on issues or the agenda that we want implemented. And that's why we have primaries, right? The Ruben Gallego kind of was able to really stake out a position because of, how Sinema was getting out of the race. I mean, there's a lot of circumstances.
Yeah.
But primaries, sometimes on both sides, you get somebody who's a little bit more to the right or to the left, because those are the people who vote in primaries. And I've always said, if people don't like your general election candidate from the party, then get more involved in the primary process.
Right.
But the they is people who want. I mean, I always want the most conservative candidate that can win in a primary, right? And not every state. I mean, Maine,
no, I completely agree.
Maryland or something like that is a very different dynamic than in Arizona.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you for joining. Very grateful to you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern, get out 2 monitors, because you're going to want to watch Sean's show but you're also going to want to two-way tonight. On two-way tonight, Dave Catanese, a great reporter, is going to come on and explain why John Podhoretz and I were wrong about Trump's relationship with the media. So stay tuned for that. I'll be just listening.
All right, I'll make a deal. I'll watch that after my
yeah.
show because
Yeah,
I want to hear that.
You're going to want to see that. John and I said basically yesterday that Trump was reigning supreme over the media and didn't care much what they thought anymore. And David has a different point of view. So join us tonight at 6 o'clock. And then tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time, guess what? A whole new episode of this program. Guarantee you nothing will be repeated. Can't guarantee you I won't wear my oof sweatshirt because I'm like John Fetterman now. I'm just going hoodie. But we'll see you then. And for those of you who need more of my content and have SiriusXM, I'm hanging up because I'm going to be on my weekly appearance with Michael Smerconish in a matter of moments. Dan, Sean, thank you both. See you in 23 hours. See everybody tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time, right here on the Two-Way platform on a little program we call Two-Way Tonight. Peace out.